All right, thank you guys for joining NewsBit's fifth video. Today I'm tempted to start a new series called Draw Your Own Conclusions, but at this point we're almost making a new series per video, so we got to focus a little bit. We're going to cover some C-SPAN footage and then look at what the media is portraying of the C-SPAN footage. This is going to be a Senate confirmation hearing and some questioning from Rand Paul to potential Assistant Health Secretary Rachel Levine. So before we jump into the footage, I just want to let you guys know what C-SPAN is. I encourage you to use it for all of your, firsthand or primary source information for government interviews and hearings. C-SPAN is an American cable and satellite television network that was created in 1979 by the cable television industry as a non-profit public service. So I encourage you guys, instead of looking at edited and clipped videos from news sources, always try to find it on C-SPAN first. So here we're going to hear Rand Paul have some questions for Dr. Levine.
Senator Paul.
Genital mutilation has been nearly universally condemned. Genital mutilation has been condemned by the WHO, the United Nations Children's Fund, the United Nations Population Fund. According to the WHO, genital mutilation is recognized internationally as a violation of human rights. Genital mutilation is considered particularly egregious because, as the WHO notes, it is nearly always carried out on minors and is a violation of the rights of children. Most genital mutilation is not typically performed by force, but as WHO notes, that by social convention, social norm, the social pressure to conform, to do what others do and have been doing, as well as the need to be accepted socially and the fear of being rejected by the community. American culture is now normalizing the idea that minors can be given hormones to prevent their biological development of their secondary sexual characteristics. Dr. Levine, you have supported both allowing minors to be given hormone blockers to prevent them from going through puberty, as well as surgical destruction of a minor's genitalia. Like surgical mutilation, hormonal interruption of puberty can permanently alter and prevent secondary sexual characteristics. The American College of Pediatricians reports that 80 to 95% of prepubertal children with gender dysphoria will experience resolution by late adolescence if not exposed to medical intervention and social affirmation. Dr. Levine, do you believe that minors are capable of making such a life-changing decision as changing one's sex?
Well, Senator, thank you for your interest in this question. Transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field with robust research and standards of care that have been developed. And if I am fortunate enough to be confirmed as the Assistant Secretary of Health, I will look forward to working with you and your office and coming to your office and discussing the particulars of the standards of care for transgender medicine.
The specific question was about minors. Let's be a little more specific since you evaded the question. Do you support the government intervening to override the parent's consent to give a child puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and/or amputation surgery of breasts and genitalia? You have said that you're willing to accelerate the protocols for street kids. I'm alarmed that poor kids with no parents who are homeless and distraught, you would just go through this and allow that to happen to a minor. I would hope that you would have compassion for Kira Bell, who's a 23-year-old girl who was confused with her identity. At 14, she read on the internet about something about transsexual. She thought, well, maybe that's what I am. She ended up getting these puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones. She had her breasts amputated. But here's what ultimately she says now. And this is a very insightful decision from someone who made a mistake, but was led to believe this was a good thing by the medical community. I made a brash decision as a teenager, as a lot of teenagers do, trying to find confidence and happiness, except now the rest of my life will be negatively affected, she said, adding that the medicalized gender transitioning was a very temporary, superficial fix for a very complex identity issue. What I'm alarmed at is that you're not willing to say absolutely minors shouldn't be making decisions to amputate their breast or to amputate their genitalia. For most of our history, we believe that minors don't have full rights and the parents need to be involved. So I'm alarmed that you won't say with certainty that minors should not have the ability to make the decision to take hormones that will affect them for the rest of their life. Will you make a more firm decision on whether or not minors should be involved in these decisions?
Senator, transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field, and if confirmed to the position of Assistant Secretary of Health, I would certainly be pleased to come to your office and talk with you and your staff about the standards of care and the complexity of this field.
Let it go into the record that the witness refused to answer the question. The question is a very specific one. Should minors be making these momentous decisions? For most of the history of medicine, we wouldn't let you have a cut sewn up in the ER. But you're willing to let a minor take things that prevent their puberty, and you think they get that back? You give a woman testosterone enough that she grows a beard, do you think she's going to go back looking like a woman when you stop the testosterone? You have permanently changed them. Infertility is another problem. None of these drugs have been approved for this. They're all being used off-label. I find it ironic that the left that went nuts over hydroxychloroquine being used possibly for COVID are not alarmed that these hormones are being used off-label. There's no long-term studies. We don't know what happens to them. We do know that there are dozens and dozens of people who've been through this who regret that this happened and a permanent change happened to them. And, you know, if you've ever been around children, 14-year-olds can't make this decision. In the gender dysphoria clinic in England, 10% of the kids are between the ages of 3 and 10. We should be outraged that someone's talking to a 3-year-old about changing their sex. I can't vote for you if you can't
Thank
make
you
a
so much,
decision.
Senator Paul. Senator Levine, thank you for answering the question.
All right, so hopefully you guys have a chance to see an uninterrupted hearing like that on your own, but hoping that this gives you that chance if you didn't know about C-SPAN till now. So we're going to look at what CNN says about this hearing. Patty Murray, a U.S. senator, I believe from Washington, rebukes Rand Paul for harmful misrepresentations at historic confirmation hearing for Rachel Levine. Give it a quick read. The Senate confirmation hearing is now underway for Dr. Rachel Levine. President Joe Biden's picked to serve as Assistant Health Secretary, who would make history as the first out transgender federal official to be confirmed by the Senate. Democratic Senator Patty Murray, the chair of Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, rebuked GOP Senator Rand Paul, saying that he made harmful misrepresentations after he appeared to equate gender confirmation surgery with genital mutilation. And gender confirmation surgery, I think, was previously known as gender reassignment surgery. So they're definitely softening the language there. But draw your own conclusions. I'm not here to do that for you. Paul began his questionings by saying, genital mutilation has been universally condemned, and then went on to say, Dr. Levine, do you believe that minors are capable of making such a life-changing decision as changing one's sex? We know what she responded. It's a very complex and nuanced field. Robust research and standards of care have been developed. If I'm fortunate enough, I look forward to coming to your office and talking about it. Murray criticized the line of questioning, saying to Levine, I appreciate your thoughtful and medically informed response to Senator Paul's questions earlier in the hearing. It is really critical to me that our nominees be treated with respect and that our questions focus on the qualifications and the work ahead of us rather than the ideological and harmful misrepresentations like those from Senator Paul earlier, and I will focus on that as chair of this committee. So I definitely think it's important to focus on qualifications, but I do think it's also important for us to talk about, platforms and positions. But, maybe I'm not fully, informed on the nature of this line of questioning. The hearing to consider Levine's nomination comes the same day as the House is slated to vote for the Equality Act, which will amend the 1964 Civil Rights Act to protect people from being discriminated based on sexual orientation, gender identity, and employment, housing, and other services. Last thing we're going to talk about is Chuck Schumer's response to this. He said that these were despicable comments made by a few Republicans about trans people. He didn't name them, so he could have been talking about other people, but I'm thinking they're implying that with the same article. Their attacks on trans people and the transgender community are just mean, and show a complete lack of understanding, complete lack of empathy. They don't represent our views, and they don't represent the views of a majority of Americans. I don't know where he's getting that data from, but I mean, he is partisan. The despicable comments just make my blood boil with anger. If I didn't have my mask on, you'd see my teeth gritting. It sounds like an actor to me, a little bit. But here we're gonna look at the Washington Post. and this is 2016. So right here we want to talk about qualifications, right? Here it said it's important to talk about qualifications in the work ahead of us. So let's look at how the Washington Post covers Rachel Levine in 2016. Can't believe that was 5 years ago. Um, the Stead office where Rachel Levine works as one of the Keystone State's top doctor is lined with family photos, including one perched high on the shelf that was taken on vacation long ago with her children when they were young, and she was a broad-shouldered man named Richard. Levine is the highest-ranking transgender official in Pennsylvania, and only a handful serving in elected or appointed offices nationwide. For many Americans, the faces of the debate over transgender rights have belonged to celebrities, like Caitlyn Jenner or Laverne Cox, rather than lawmakers. Nationwide, there are only 3 elected transgender officials appointed at the state and local level. It's really bad. There's hardly anybody. We don't have a plan to get more. So to me, when we talk about our politicians, I'm a lot more concerned with the platform that they're running on, how they can help better the lives of American people. Already we see right here that this is just littered with identity politics. And I encourage you to keep going, but they talk about disturbing rhetoric, talk about transgender again. Granted, this may have to, this is focused on, the first transgender or one of the very few. But when I'm meeting someone, especially a health official or a public official, I want to know what they stand for and how they're going to help my people. So Rand Paul alluded to accelerating certain protocols for street kids. This is the interview at Franklin and Marshall. So we're going to look at a little bit of the protocols and beliefs that Rachel Levine presented, and I think she took them from the Netherlands. So we'll bring this up.
Then you can do this protocol. So the protocol developed in the Netherlands has 2 phases. The first phase, at the young adolescent age, is to give what are called a pubertal blocker, to give a medicine to block the progression of puberty, so you don't go through the wrong puberty. And then to continue some counseling. And then somewhere between 14 and 16 years of age, to start slowly cross-gender hormones. Again, they have to go through puberty. Puberty doesn't happen, it's going to take years. So you start in low doses, you gradually increase, so that they never go through the wrong puberty. That way, for a transgender woman, male to female, their voice doesn't drop, they don't have hair, they don't have to have electrolysis. For a transgender man, they don't have breast development that will need surgery, they don't have periods, etc. So you block puberty, and then you can, at the appropriate time, send them through the puberty consistent with their gender identity. Does that make sense? Okay. So
No.
it's two phases. And then there are follow-up protocols. Most surgical treatment would be done at around 18. There are some procedures that might be done earlier than 18. And there are some exceptions. Now, this is a great protocol if you're seeing patients in the cornfields of Virginia. Or at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, where the parents bring them and they all have nice insurance and this and that. If you are, however, at the Mazzoni Center, which is the LGBT center in inner city Philly, and you're seeing street youth who have been essentially thrown out by their parents because of their gender identity and expression, you don't always have the luxury of all of these protocols, so you don't usually use blockers. If you don't give them hormones, they're going to get street hormones, which puts them at risk for infectious diseases. So you might accelerate this if you're seeing street kids. So the academic protocol I just shared with you, but in practice, if you're seeing street youth, whether it's Philly or New York or LA or Boston or Washington, then you might have to accelerate this somewhat so that the young people feel validated and are getting care consistent with their path, their pace, and their path. So you don't go to does that make sense?
And I definitely want you to draw your own conclusions, but it doesn't really make sense to me as a presenter of this information. She talked about this protocol that was developed in the Netherlands. It then says, but this is what I believe. So I don't know. I think she just has an interesting stance, and I just want to present you what this person stands for, as opposed to some buzzword identity politics presented by a lot of the media that we see. We'll give this another second, let her finish another thought, and then let's go on to some a news source. We have an interesting interview from a doctor, and then we'll see what the overall sentiment is of the hearing that you just saw.
So surgery. I'm not a surgeon, so I'm not going to talk too much about surgery. It used to be called sexual reassignment surgery, but the term right now is usually gender confirmation surgery. There are male to female regimens. There are female to male regimens. There are genital surgery regimens. There's breast surgery regimens. So if someone who didn't get the blockers, who is male identified and has large breasts, will probably want a double mastectomy and creation of a male chest. It's very hard to be a male identified person with large breasts. If you have someone who is male to female identified, a transgender woman, they might want more breast development. Now, the hormones will do that very nicely, but smaller than cisgender women. I usually tell people to be happy and to be patient. They'll come in and say that their breasts, they don't like their breasts, and they think that I don't like the shape, and they're asymmetrical, and they want breast surgery. And I said, in my practice, I took care of a lot of genetic women. They didn't like their breasts either. They wanted them different or bigger, or they were asymmetrical, and welcome to the female condition. But
Safe to say, many people are not happy with exactly what bodies they're born into. So it's funny how she can tell people to just be happy with what you're born into, and I don't know. There's just some weird inconsistent thinking here. But I definitely encourage you guys to look into this video. Also, you see I'm using HookTube. HookTube allows you just put HookTube instead of YouTube. Allows you to watch YouTube videos without giving YouTube too many views. I hope I don't get banned for this off YouTube, but definitely worth doing if you're interested in that kind of movement. All right, we're gonna look at a quick video that's embedded into a CBS Philly article. Sen Rand Paul slammed for transphobic questioning during Dr. Levine's confirmation hearing on Capitol Hill. You guys saw the video. Did you see anything transphobic about Rand Paul's questions? I think to me he was concerned mostly with minors, and he didn't seem anti-trans or transphobic the way that this headline is screeching. But look at this. Let's look at this doctor. I'll refrain from my judgment. Let's see what this doctor says.
On Twitter.
I think he's a terribly misinformed and ill-educated on the subject of transgender medicine and surgery.
Dr. Sherman Leese is a world-renowned transgender surgeon who operates in the Philadelphia region. He calls Senator Paul's comments discriminatory.
Those remarks have nothing to do with Rachel Levine, who's a highly qualified physician. She's trained in pediatrics and psychiatry.
So those questions have nothing to do with Rachel Levine, but my take was that Rand Paul is asking her on these stances. I don't know, and I don't know how they were discriminatory. To me, and now this is where I'm glad I didn't make the series draw your own conclusions, because I'm drawing conclusions left and right here. But they seem to be more in the effort of protecting children, because children become are confused in many ways. And like he said, I think he said 85 to 90% of children that go through kind of gender dysmorphia, if that's the word, end up resolving it by the time they're of a greater age, or by the time they're older. So now let's look at some general sentiment between what the mainstream media is saying. New York Times, Rachel Levine responds to Rand Paul about transgender something. I can't click that because I'll get paywalled. Rand Paul's questions were condemned as, I don't think I'll get paywalled here. Transgender nominees draws fire from Democrats. Well, we saw the fire from Patty Murray and Chuck Schumer. Rand Paul launches into transphobic rant against trans. Rand Paul grills transgender health nominee Rachel Levine. Rand Paul rants about transgender health care at Rachel Levine. So at this point, I'm picking up an overall negative sentiment here. And I don't know. I would love to live in a world where somebody can just send you a link to this C-SPAN video and you draw your own conclusions. I apologize a little bit for sprinkling mine in there, but I hope this was at least a little bit enlightening and helpful to you. And I definitely encourage you to draw your own conclusions. All right, thank you guys for joining. Until next time.